Here in the Bay Area, it is a dreary, gloomy, overcast Monday, and I want to talk about Pluto again. Now, last week we talked about Pluto by sign, by talking about the Pluto generations from Pluto in Leo all the way up to now Pluto in Aquarius, or November 19th. Pluto and Aquarius. But in this week's video, I want to talk about Pluto by the houses. So yeah, let's get into it. Hey Cosmic Cuties, it is your friendo, the Lady Ms. Vagina Jenkins, and yes, we are talking about Pluto by the houses. So like I said in the intro, last week's video was all about the Pluto generations and in what sign you might have Pluto. So there's some really delicious information on that in that last video, which I will link up here, I think is the direction that I will link it. We'll find out together. Now, when I was making that video last week, I kept saying it matters a lot about what house your Pluto placement is in and what aspects Pluto is making to other planets in your chart. And so this week, why don't we talk about the houses of it all and really get into the nitty-gritty details. I was contemplating whether I should make a houses video or not, and I got confirmation because of a comment from Duna Ruiditos 7620. I hope I pronounced that right. But yeah, shout out to them. Thank you so much for your comment and your suggestion. I absolutely love it when y'all have comments, period, and are in conversation with me. But also when y'all have suggestions specifically for different types of videos, it helps a lot because it's hard to come up with new concepts and new ideas for videos every week. So yeah, thank you and shout out to them so much for the idea. Also, before we get into like the review and the details of it all, I also always want to offer up this caveat whenever we're talking about Pluto, even though I find it a particularly fascinating planet or planetary teacher. I want y'all to know that astrology is made up of generations and cross-cultural experiences of observing the world around us, understanding those patterns and applying them to our lives, right? And so we have had, like I said, generations and so many cultures all over the world that have put into the data pile of our understanding of all of these different planetary placements. But Pluto was only discovered in 1930, and it takes 248 years to make its full orbit through all 12 signs. So we haven't even had half of an orbit to observe Pluto and apply any sort of patterns to our lives. So I say all that to say that anything that anyone tells you about Pluto, including myself, is, based on hypothesis. And I really enjoy the idea of being one of the many astrologers from this time period and this culture that are contributing to observation and data gathering as it relates to Pluto. But again, we are still very much in the observation data gathering phase of understanding Pluto. So that is your grain of salt to understanding Pluto. So just to review what Pluto is all about. So generally speaking, the planets in our chart are sort of teachers, lessons that we're meant to learn over the course of our lifetime, right? Pluto could be interpreted as the lesson of finding one's personal power. How does Pluto do this? Well, it asks us to dig deep, to do shadow work, to look at the things that don't normally see the light of day, the things that people don't normally like to talk about, the unspoken things, the secrets, to look down deep, dig up into the muck and expose the things that need to be exposed to the light so that we can transform them and step into the light of our personal power. Now, a thing that we also understand about human nature is we don't necessarily transform and do shadow work just because it's good for us. Quite often, it's the experience of learning through really intense experiences. Some might even say traumatic experiences. And then we have all of the Pluto generations that we covered in last week's video. And so Pluto in Libra, perhaps there are intense or traumatic experiences around relationships. Pluto in Scorpio, perhaps there are intense or traumatic experiences around sex, sexuality, secrets, death, the occult, addiction, things like that. Pluto in Sagittarius, perhaps there are intense experiences around dealing with higher education or understanding like limiting beliefs and personal philosophies that need to change. Pluto in Capricorn, maybe it's the intense experiences around authority or governmental bodies or traditions. And on November 19th, Pluto will finally make its final ingress into Aquarius. And what can we expect for folks that might be experiencing Pluto in Aquarius? I mean, who knows? Perhaps it's intense experiences around disruption, rebellion against those sort of authorities and traditions. So let's get into the houses of it all. I do want to offer up a small trigger warning that I'm going to be talking about Plutonian experiences, so intense experiences, maybe even talking about some traumas. And so, yeah, take good care of yourself. Pause if you need to. Mute and check out the transcript if you need to decide if you want to go any further. So, just want to make sure everybody's taking good care of themselves. All right, so let's get into it. Pluto by the houses. So one thing that I want to say is thinking about the angular houses, the 1st, the 4th, the 7th, the 10th, because those are such strong angles, sometimes having Pluto in those particular houses can be even more intense experiences, because we're talking about the sense of self, the 1st house, how you relate to others, the 7th house, the secrets that you would like to keep in the family that you come from, versus what is actually out there on Front Street and contributing to your public reputation. So these are really, really big areas of life. So having Pluto in these particular houses, you know, could be a little bit more of an intense experience. And yeah, that's the first thing I want to offer up, but while we're getting into the houses. So yes, Pluto in the 1st house. What about yourself, or at least your self-concept and the way that you identify yourself, your ego, like in terms of like how you conceive of who you are? How is that wrapped up in Plutonian experiences? Are there intense experiences around shifting identities? Are there intense experiences of people trying to dominate or subjugate you, or around you trying to dominate and subjugate others? And what is your personal relationship to secrets? A lot of times when I think about Pluto in the 1st house, I very much think about the feeling of being wary, aware, hyper vigilant about the potential for people to dominate you. And then what does that mean in terms of being able to develop your sense of self? Like, yes, to having this intact sense of self and your own boundaries, but also how is it that you let people in, let them see you, your real, true, authentic self, and then how does that being seen contribute to not only your growth, but like your deep transformation? And then how does that being seen allow you to step into your sense of actual personal power? And so the question here, I think, is the question of what is the difference between having these boundaries, which are a tool to keep you safe and intact, versus feeling a sense of power in yourself and how you present yourself and are yourself in the world. I'll also say that Pluto in the first house is described as a person who is intense quite often. And is this person intense and intimidating, or are other people intimidated? Is the thing that always comes to mind. And what is intensity? What is the line between intensity? Is it the line between having really strong personal boundaries versus like people expecting porous boundaries, and the ability to be able to get over on you comes to mind, but let me not speak so strongly, but the ability to be able to push and find holes in porous boundaries, like what is intense about having personal boundaries and keeping your own counsel and understanding that your secrets belong to you first and foremost? This Pluto in the first house placement, it's just all of these questions around what is the difference between like intensity and intimidation versus other people feeling intimidated? What is the difference between you having your own personal boundaries and keeping your own counsel and understanding that your secrets belong to you first and foremost, versus being able to show your authentic self and share your authentic self to people? What kind of experiences will you have around those issues? And then how will those experiences contribute to a deep sense of transformation that ends up with this sense of personal empowerment? Yes, to like protecting oneself. And that's what I'm talking about when I'm thinking about the sense of like boundaries, but also where is the place where we can have a little bit more ease in our estimation of what life is? Is life a battleground? Is everyone trying to poke at your boundaries? And are there places where you can stand tall knowing that your boundaries are secure and show up authentically and share of yourself with others? That's the kind of personal power I would hope for a person with Pluto in the first house. Pluto in the second house. Pluto experiences that deal with material possessions, money, and also your values. And so I wonder about intense or traumatic experiences where you feel like things have been taken from you, or that others are looking to take things from you. I wonder about shadow work that can be done around the fear of lack or poverty or not having material resources in some kind of way. So, intense experiences around things. What are you holding on to, like quite literally, like physical material possessions, from an energy of lack and scarcity, or maybe over sentimentality, and what can and should be released, and how is what you are holding to, what is that, God, there was some song from my youth about how the things you own you. That feels very Pluto in the second house to me. I also think about like experiences, yes, to maybe experiences of loss, around possessions, material resources, money, and how that might transform you. And do you allow it, does it transform you into a person who becomes miserly, stingy, particularly cautious around sharing of resources with other people? Or does it help you to find your own intrinsic value just as a person? How does it shift your understanding of the energy of money? Is money a thing to be hoarded? And material resources, are money, material resources things to be hoarded? Or are they energies that come and go and have a sense of flow about them? And how does thinking about these things as having a sense of flow about them empower you? What is the difference between holding on to and having these boundaries around money, material resources? And are these boundaries serving you to feel powerful? Or with letting go, releasing, understanding the flow of these resources contribute to a sense of personal power? I can't believe this just occurred to me as I'm editing the video, but also Pluto in second house experiences of having people lord power over you via money, or the opposite, using your money to control and lord over others. Yes. I also very much wonder about the experience of being taken advantage of in terms of your money, material resources, or the fear of being taken advantage of and always being on the lookout for it, and how so much of, so much of the ways that life tends to unfold is based in our perception of how life will unfold. And how is this looking through at the world through the lens of, oh, I'm going to get got? How does that disempower you? And how could you shift that in some kind of way that feels more empowering? We'll also say that these folks, it could be this spectrum of behaviors where, like, yes, there's like stinginess, miserliness, maybe hoarding, but also particularly good with understanding money, resources at an intuitive level, and being able to offer that advice to other people. And yeah, how could remembering that about your particular Pluto in the second house placement help you to understand, again, the energetic flow of money and resources, and that they can be shared with trustworthy folks? Pluto in the third house. I wonder about intense experiences with your siblings. And I wonder about intense experiences, beliefs around communications and ideas. When I think about Pluto in the third house, I very much am thinking about, oh, this is not a person who takes anyone at their word. Any idea presented to them is not immediately fact until they have done their own research and looked into it. I definitely think about this person as like a person who can see underneath what is being said. Understanding that there are these like meta messages to everything that is being not only said, but also in any way communicated to us, like understanding like the dirty underlayer of advertising and marketing, and having an intuitive perception of those kinds of things. And so in that way, I think of a Pluto in the third house person as more of observational. Like, this is the kind of vibe of like, I don't necessarily believe what you say, but rather what you do. And this is very much observing the world around them to understand the actual truth of the energy and the vibe, rather than what is being said about the energy and the vibe. And because they are often understanding the world through observation and not necessarily taking people at their word, then how how is their own sense of self-expression playing out in the world? Is this the experience of being a little bit more taciturn, a little bit more cautious, conservative with your speech? Is this the experience of, like, you know, keeping your mouth closed so that people don't know too much, because when you share too much, maybe someone can get over on you? Yeah. And then how did you learn this? I wonder if it's the experience of experiencing this via your siblings somehow, as a young person. Just because of third house, I think of, yes, communication, but so much of our communication is formed through our early interactions with the kids around us, and the kids around us are often our siblings, cousins, that kind of thing. And so, yeah, what did you learn from early childhood experiences with your siblings, your play cousins, that taught you that words are not to be trusted and that you also must be careful with your words? Now, I will say that in terms of personal power, this is definitely because of that, you know, kind of being careful with your words, the experience of speaking decisively, the experience of speaking with conviction, and that there is a power to the words that the person might say, or, you know, write, even if, you know, like if you find yourself in and being some sort of written communicator, as your job, that the words are specifically chosen, they are concise, they are clear, and they are powerful. Yes, Pluto in the third house, digging deep into what is being said, what is being written, to understand the real truth of things. And then how does that transform you? And then how does it allow you to step into your personal power? And is your personal power somehow rooted in your use of the language? Concisely speaking, writing, communicating, self-expression, those kinds of things. And then we come to Pluto in the fourth house. So, Pluto in the fourth house, reminder that we were talking about the angles and how these angular houses, 1, 4, 7, 10, might be a more intense experience of Pluto. And so, the fourth house, I very much think of as the house of secrets, period. Because these are things that are, they're in the dark half of your chart, and they are literally in the darkest house of your chart. So this is the stuff that you want to keep a little bit more to yourself, or this is the experience of the family of origin, you know, that kind of, that saying that people say, you know, what stays in this house, what happens in this house stays in this house, that kind of energy. But either way, it's the energy of secrets, family secrets, or secrets about yourself that you want to keep to yourself and not exposed to the world. And how is this secret keeping somehow feeling? How is the secret keeping somehow allowing you to feel a sense of power? Or not experiencing power? Like, are these secrets that are being, family secrets that are being kept because there is shame involved? Are these secrets about yourself that are being kept because there's shame involved? And what would it be like to really dig deep, to look at that shame, and to understand the ways in which whatever those situations are, that shame might be rooted in, might be disempowering to you, or have been situations that were intended to take away your sense of personal power? And then how can you transform somehow the things that have happened, to become sources of personal power for you? Pluto in the fourth house can be quite challenging. I think that this is the place, I just want to be transparent and say that I thought that I might talk about specific Pluto in each house experiences, but I don't feel comfortable naming specific experiences. So I'm just going to talk more generally throughout the course of this video. If you have Pluto in the fourth house, I know that you know why. And I just want you to know that I see you, and I don't see you in a way that shames you. Um, I hope that my seeing you does not feel like some sort of source of shame. And I want you to know that things that you've experienced should also not be sources of shame, and that I really am rooting for you to dig deep to understand your power now as an adult in a way that you may not have had power when you were a young person, and the ways that you can choose to live, do, be better, different, and more empowered in your life as you grow, heal, and transform. Yes. Yeah. That is what I will say about Pluto in the fourth house. And then I love you. For real, for reals. Okay. And then we come to Pluto in the fifth house. So when I think of Pluto in the fifth house, it's interesting because the fifth house is about the stuff that brings us joy and pleasure, right? But Pluto, is intense. He wants to teach us lessons. He wants us to do shadow work. And so shadow work via the tools of pleasure. What have your and creativity? What have your experiences been around your dating life or your hobbies or creative endeavors that have made you feel somehow disempowered? And what sort of intense experiences, maybe even low-key traumatic experiences, have you experienced around dating life, power dynamics in your dating life, both consensual and not consensual, because there's also the experience of kink, right? Where we get to practice what power dynamics are played out, how and what power dynamics are played out in this consensual environment. So where are healthy experiences of playing out power dynamics versus unhealthy experiences of playing out power dynamics as it relates to like dating, kink, sex life, those kinds of things. And what has your creative practice been like? And how do you share your sense of creative self-expression with the world? Is dating and romance always intense? Is it always this kind of push, pull, all or nothing kind of experience in order to bring you pleasure and joy? And are there healthier ways to experience that kind of intensity that might make you feel more empowered, Are there ways that you can transform negative, in quotes, experiences of power dynamics into more healthy experiences of consensually playing with power dynamics? Also, creative endeavors. Yes, the idea of like putting your heart and soul into your art, and also where in your creative practice, in your self expression, can it be lighter and more joyous and somehow more easeful? Do you have a balance in your creative self expression sort of practices that allows you to experience, yes, putting your heart, soul, and body into a thing, and also just lightly enjoying something? I also want to mention fifth house and children. So, in what ways might you be dominating or at least playing with power dynamics with your children? And in what ways can we find some balance in these power dynamics so that each one of you, both the parent and the child, gets to feel a sense of power and autonomy? And then there is Pluto in the sixth house. There is the idea of work-life balance, my friends. There is the idea that your work is valuable and important, but is it everything? And how much is your work affecting your peace? Your worry about your work, the intensity in which you devote to your work or to your health and self-improvement. Yes, you could always be improving yourself. And I think it's really important for, with any Pluto placement to think about opportunities to do shadow work, to like dig deep into the things. But is improvement and constantly seeking for improvement keeping you from doing that work? How much is busyness keeping you from understanding the importance of stillness and quietness to your healing? Pluto in the sixth house can absolutely be the experience of being this amazingly diligent worker who is so adept at solving problems and looking for problems and understanding intuitively what problems may show up in any given like system workplace, but also what is the place where you allow yourself some peace, and are not constantly digging for things to fix, both in the workplace and in your own personal health and just daily routines and practices. Pluto was often about this idea of like digging deep, looking at things, being really diligent at our looking at things. But I wonder about Pluto in the sixth house and how sometimes you might just want to like chill. I also think that with Pluto in the sixth house, there can be an intuition for understanding the mind-body connection. And maybe that's what the diligence around constantly improving the self and self-improvement is rooted in. And also reminder that stillness is as valuable, even more so, as the doing, as the busyness. And are you finding power in the busyness? And where and how can you experience a sense of power rather than a sense of being a problem that needs to be solved? I also wonder with Pluto in the sixth house a little bit about workplace power dynamics. Are there ways in which your boss makes you feel somehow subjugated, or ways in which you are somehow dominating people that work underneath you with your level of intensity about work and the research, problem solving, etc., that needs to be put into work? And then we come to Pluto in the seventh house. Once again, like I said in the intro, Pluto on the angles, 1, 4, 7, 10th house, can be a much more intense experience because of these are the kind of foundational issues that make us a human. So yeah, seventh house, how we relate to others and what power dynamics are playing out in your one-on-one connections to others. Do you feel dominated, or are you dominating and trying to subjugate others out of a sense of needing to control them somehow? And are there any ways in which you can experience this power play, domination, subjugation in a more consensual manner? What intense one-on-one relationships experiences have you had that you find yourself deeply transformed by? And how are they allowing you to step into a sense of power, or are they creating a need for you to step away or find and exercise other ways of control as you're thinking about relating to other people on a one-on-one basis? think that's the main thing that I'm thinking about with Pluto in the seventh house is control. Do you yourself feel a sense of control and autonomy when you are relating to other people, or do you immediately feel a sense of loss of autonomy when you think about your relationships and relating to others? You attract these kind of intense, possessive, or domineering sorts of people. How does their sense of power seem to draw you in? And what is it that you admire about them? And what is it that you perceive about their power that attracts you to them? And are there ways that you can feel that about and for yourself, exclusive of them? It's also interesting to think about Pluto showing up as you relate to other people. Yes, this idea of like domination and control in relationships, but what about your relating to other people can bring out the Plutonian in them? Does your interaction with other people bring up issues around obsession and control and secrets and worry in them? There's just so much about just control and how that shows up in relationships. And this is one of the Pluto placements where I don't know how to offer this advice without sounding like a codependent, but yes, to finding your own personal power, but also encouraging the people that you are relating with to find and remind themselves of their own power as well, so that there aren't issues around jealousy, possessiveness, control, and that each person feels powerful in the relating to each other instead of things going sour and then becoming intense and otherwise icky. There just can be so much in terms of both parties feeling a lack of personal power and wanting to control out of a fear of betrayal or loss somehow in the relationship that comes up with the Pluto in seventh house sort of person. And then, the work is so much about digging deep to figure out why do these triggers come up? What are these triggers rooted in? And then how can we shift and transform them into something that feels powerful for, yes, me, but also the person that I am relating to. Pluto in the 8th house, I feel like can be an extension of Pluto in the 7th house. Yes, like Pluto in the 7th house is about like these relationships that we are having, with other people and how there can be domination, control, that kind of things in them. But then Pluto in the 8th house, if you're thinking about the 8th house as kind of like the 2nd house of the 7th, this is like derivative astrology sorts of things. So if the 7th house is, my partner, then the 8th house could be, the resources that I share with my partner. And a lot of times I feel like the first resource that I see come up in terms of Pluto and 8th house sorts of things is the resource of sex and sexuality. How could sex, kink, play, that kind of stuff be used as a tool of control, domination, subjugation in relating to other people? That's the very first thing that comes to mind when I think about Pluto in 8th. And then there's also the other 8th house issues around like addiction, shared resources that are not sex, like money, material resources, inheritances, that kind of thing. But if this is about the realm of all of the things that we don't like to talk about, how are you experiencing issues around intense experiences and traumatic experiences around feeling disempowered or under the control of someone else? I'm thinking typically like a romantic one-on-one relationship, but it can also be, with people that you are in platonic friendships with around issues around sex, shared resources, experiences of addiction. Yeah, how are these kinds of experiences happening? How are they deeply transforming you? And then how do you find your power in it all? Think about Pluto in the eighth house as a way to find power. I very much think about folks that are really interested in the occult, understanding psychology, particularly like the darker aspects of what motivates people in terms of understanding power dynamics and those kinds of things. Then if you find as a Pluto in the eighth house person that these kinds of like darker psychology or occult issues are a special interest for you, is there a way to find power in exploring these things more thoroughly? And then does that end up making you an amazing therapist, psychologist, addiction counselor, like those kinds of things, because of an intuitive understanding of these issues? Very much see Pluto in the eighth house going into these kind of healing professions in this particular way, especially around like addiction, sexuality, psychology, those kinds of things. Helping people through like trauma, helping people through their crises. This could be a way in which a empowered Pluto in eighth house plays out. I'll also say that, reminder that these houses come in pairs, that they are two sides of the same coin. So if the second house could be some fears around, being taken advantage of for my money, the eighth house could be some fears, warranted or unwarranted, around sharing resources with others, and how that might lead to power imbalances. And then once again, it's the work, is the digging deep to understand the triggers for this kind of thought and the ways in which you can navigate the sharing of resources and all of these eighth house issues in ways that make you feel more powerful and less likely to control or be controlled by others. And then we come to Pluto in the ninth house of our belief systems. Also, academia, basically how we find meaning in the world, I'll say that. And so again, I love the ways in which the houses are pairs of each other. So the way that we talked about Pluto in the third house, and being mistrustful of people's words, I wonder about the experience of Pluto in the ninth house, being mistrustful of people's belief systems, mistrustful maybe of folks in higher education, academia, the ivory tower, that kind of thing. And then also what that means in terms of like having strong boundaries around your own belief systems. Like, are you dogmatic in your own belief systems? Do you allow other people to have their belief systems? Basically, are you suspicious of other or new ideas? And how do you incorporate and shift and transform your most deeply held belief systems? Are those belief systems rooted in traumas and intense experiences? Or are they belief systems that you've come to because they actually work for and empower you in your life? I also wonder about the Pluto and ninth house person and their ability to share their ideas, both trusting that their ideas will be received and also trusting other people to consider their wisdoms as valuable. I also wonder about Pluto in the ninth house having experiences where they are deeply transformed by traveling, or deeply transformed by conversations with or cultural exchange with people from cultures that they were not necessarily raised in. Life-changing, transformative experiences around the sharing and disseminating of their ideas and their wisdoms. Also, when I'm thinking about these deeply transformative experiences, like, what does it mean to share your wisdoms with the world? What if those wisdoms are not received well? How does that transform you? And how does it make you feel both either disempowered or empowered, the way that your wisdom is received in the world? You know, on the positive half of this, I definitely think about Pluto in the 9th house as being a powerful speaker or orator, lecturer, academic, that kind of vibe. The sort of person that like inspires other people or is particularly captivating. Like, if we're talking about, whenever we're talking about Pluto, we can talk about power dynamics. So power dynamics in the sharing of deeply held beliefs and philosophies. So sometimes that can create the kind of person that's like a guru or cult leader type of vibe. Like, are you captivating people and inspiring them, or are you captivating to control? Or have you yourself experienced being dominated by other people's ideas? You know, maybe in a Christian fundamentalist context, or in a sort of alternative cult sort of context, or in an academia kind of context. Then your ideas and deeply held beliefs, how did you come to them, these intense and transformative experiences? And what is your attitude towards allowing other people to have and come to their own belief systems, or having disdain for people who you feel have not done the work properly, however you're defining that? Do you allow other people to have their own belief systems, or do you need to somehow dominate and colonize their brain space? Like, are we converting people, or are we allowing people to believe as they believe, even if it is different from the way that you believe? It very clearly, you know, the personal empowerment that comes from having a really strong sense of your beliefs, a sense of like your philosophy that is foundational to who you are, I'm sure that's incredibly empowering. It just becomes icky or disdainful or distasteful when there are power dynamics at play as it relates to your beliefs, the way that you share these beliefs and wisdoms with the world, and how people receive that information. Do they feel inspired, or do they feel diminished and dominated by the way or the information that you share? Once again, we talked about earlier in the video, Pluto on any of the angles, the first house, 4th house, 7th house, or 10th house. Very significant, very intense sort of life experience, maybe more intense than finding Pluto in some of the non-angular houses. So with Pluto in the 10th house, we are very much talking about the public reputation, the career, that kind of stuff, how you're known in the world. And again, this is that it kind of reminds me about Pluto in the 1st house kind of energy. Pluto in the 10th, being seen as this incredibly intense, maybe mysterious or secretive kind of person. Like, this is wrapped up in what people think of you, your public reputation. And because of this, I think of like Pluto in the 10th house as this kind of love-hate sort of personality. Like, people are very, very into you, or they're very much not into you. And then how does your reputation for being someone that people love and admire or hate and are intimidated by, how is that public reputation preceding you before you even enter into the room, for better or worse? And then when I'm thinking about Pluto, I'm always wondering about power, control, power dynamics. How is this playing out in your public reputation? Are you known for dominating other people? Or are you known and have a reputation for being easy to dominate? Because this is all playing out in a public sphere and Pluto is so much associated with secrets, what is the constant? I wonder if there's a constant experience of trying to hide yourself from public view or hide something about yourself that you feel is a secret from public view. And then how much of the power dynamics at play between you and the public, whoever the public is in your life, rooted in, oh no, they will see. Oh gosh, I can't let them see. Yeah. So because public reputation is so often linked to work, I wonder about the Pluto in 10th house person being more adept at secrets, the work of secrets. So when I think about the work of secrets, I think about doing deep dives into research and somehow like publishing and showing the world this deep dive into research. I think about careers or public reputations rooted in being able to do shadow work. Perhaps this is like a well-known psychotherapist or psychologist. And then too, I also wonder about the Pluto in the 10th house's relationship to the public parent. The 4th and 10th house can also be said to, yes, they're the houses of like home, the 4th house, public reputation in the 10th house, but they can also be associated with the parents that hold either one of those positions. So if there is a parent that is more in charge of the home sphere versus a parent that is more out in public and doing like the career thing to bring home the bacon. And I don't want to gender it by saying like the mother and the father, because not everybody has that same experience. I had a working mother, and so my mother can be found in my 10th house. But either way, what your relationship with your public parent is and what kind of values they may have instilled in you around the power that can be found through hard work or career specifically. In what ways might that parent have made you feel subordinate or dominated? And then are any of those dynamics playing out in your career, continuing to be subordinated, or the ways in which you talk to and deal with your subordinates? And then the journey here could be to dig deep into the things that trigger you about the self that you are presenting to the world, and understand that there are intense or transformative experiences that you may have in life that play out on the public stage. And then again, how do those experiences help you to empower yourself? In what ways do they make you feel disempowered and triggered? And then how can we use that information to transform that to a sense of personal power as you present your sense of self to the world? And then we come to Pluto in the 11th house, and that is my Pluto placement. So I'm going to talk a little bit about my life, and then I'll talk more generally, because I've been dying to bring it up. Okay, so my experience of Pluto in the 11th house, particularly Pluto in Libra in the 11th house. So Pluto in Libra, the transformative nature of my relationships to others, playing out in the 11th house of the friend groups that we belong to, or the sort of cultural identity is not what I mean. What do I mean? You know, identity groups, is that a phrase? Like how I consider myself part of the queer community or autistic community or YouTubers community. That kind of thing is what I'm talking about. So my place both in my friend groups and in those kinds of public experiences of community. Um, oh, it's been hard. Pluto, I think, can help people to see the underlayers of things. And I talked about this in the third house, but I don't know that I've touched on it when I talked about the other houses. But there is information that is being conveyed, or people are acting the ways that they're acting at one level, but Pluto helps you to see the layers underneath these levels. And that is my experience of group social interactions, and I freaking hate it. I can see who thinks that they're popular. I can see who is being bullied. I can see who is pretending as if they are too cool for school so that they won't be bullied. That's me. I can see the social dynamics playing out, and not only can I see them, I feel them at a nervous sense system sort of level. I'm not quite sure what that's rooted in, but yeah, I see a lot about the power dynamics that are playing out in groups, and I feel like that is a very clear Pluto and 11th house kind of experience. And then how do those where do you fit in those group power dynamics? And then how are these power dynamics making you feel triggered and small and dominated, or transformed and empowered? Pluto in the 11th, definitely, I would say a lot of intense experiences with group relationships, a lot of changes to the groups that you feel as if you belong to. Sometimes intense, traumatic, or dramatic changes to the groups that you feel you belong to. Alienated from the quilters guilds because of power dynamics playing out there, or an experience of losing a group of friends due to being bullied. These are the kinds of Pluto and 11th house experiences. Even like individual friendships have like a layer of intensity to them, and I have found in my experience, and I think this is maybe because of the Pluto and Libra ness of it all. In my experience, it can also be one-on-one relationships that are rooted in power dynamics, and I often find myself feeling outright bullied, or trying to control others through caretaking. And that feels embarrassing to admit out loud. And also, it is my truth. And this is the kind of work that we're talking about when we're talking about Pluto. Looking at the truth, whether it is ugly or beautiful, understanding why these dynamics continue to play out, what the root of these patterns are, finding the triggers, finding the places that make us feel empowered, and deciding which path we're going to go on. I will also say that because of these traumatic experiences in groups, I personally have a deep aversion to group activities. I don't know if that's universally a Pluto and 11th experience, but I feel like it could be. You let me know in the comments if you are having similar thoughts and experiences. And even as much as I hate groups, I keep trying, I'm not gonna lie, but the times that I am in groups, I tend to experience something so intense that it does help me to level up. It helps me to understand my personal power, generally speaking, and my power in navigating groups in the future. The social sphere it is incredibly difficult for me to navigate, and I don't know if I will ever understand it. And when I have the spoons and capacity to rise to the challenge of interacting in a group's context, I always learn something about myself. Yeah. That's what I will say about Pluto in the 11th. Also, it sucks because my North Node, the placement of destiny that we're supposed to like grow into over the course of our lives, that is also in the 11th house. So I am triggered triggered as hell, and am supposed to grow this particular area of my life. How, Sway? How? And then finally, we come to Pluto in the 12th house. I think it's really interesting to have the idea of Pluto in the 12th house is very, very intriguing to me because 12th house is so often associated with hidden enemies and secrets, and Pluto is so much associated with allowing us to see the underlayers of things. And I wonder if this is a superpower. Pluto in the 12th to me seems like the experience of being able to see the motivations, the hidden motivations of your hidden enemies, to understand more clearly who these people are that are detracting from your sense of self, because the 12th house is the house that comes before the first house, right? And so if you move backwards, you're undoing. So the 12th house is the house of self undoing. So having the planet about personal power here, you can, I wonder if it's the experience of being able to see patterns in which you have undone yourself, or people in your life that are trying to undo your sense of self. So being clear on both self-betrayal and actual betrayal from other folks. Or perhaps imagining those kinds of things too, and constantly being on guard. And then I'm a little bit stuck on it, but the secrecy of it all and being able to see the secrets and understand the secrets, does that mean that you can see other people's hidden motivations, not just your enemies, but like all of the secrets that they are keeping, their hidden motivations, their underlayer that they are not trying to show to people? Is this being more adept and finding your power at seeing these kinds of things, these things that people are trying to keep hidden, whatever those are? Also, because of Pluto and its association with transformation, and then the 12th house and its association with being isolated, so experiences that cause isolation, hospitalization, imprisonment, that kind of thing, anything that takes you away from society, are there transformative experiences that are rooted in stepping away from society, for better or worse? Like, is it, involuntary incarceration, or stepping away and going on a spiritual retreat of some sort of thing? And then how do those experiences contribute to your sense of personal power? Imagine with Pluto in the 12th house that there's a lot to be said for needing the isolation time to process intense, traumatic, particularly triggering experiences. Pluto in the 12th house, I would also think that there would be an interest in psychology or dreams, the unconscious realm, generally speaking, and then using the unconscious realm for yourself to help you to transform and level up to your personal power, but also maybe just an interest in understanding the unconscious, subconscious of other folks and the psychology of other folks, or doing dream analysis kind of work, but for yourself or for others. Because the 12th house is so much associated with our unconscious, subconscious motivations, I wonder a lot about what it would be like to do shadow work with a Pluto in 12th house placement. Whether it would be easier or more difficult to understand one's internal landscape and one's deep subconscious, if you're able to access that more easily, or if it becomes more difficult and more hidden to the self. Weigh in if you have this placement. Do you feel like your darkest self is a secret even from you, or is it something that you're constantly digging into? I wonder also if it's the experience of being like so intuitive about other secrets and maybe not having access to your own. Anyway, weigh in if this is your placement. I'm very, very curious about it. Yeah. So that is Pluto in all 12 of the houses. Combine this video with the last video that talks about the Pluto placements in the signs, at least from Leo to Aquarius, the information that we have about them. I would be curious if you find resonance when you combine both the sign and the house for your particular Pluto placement. Let me know. Let me know. Also, push back. Let me know if there are ways in which what I said is not quite accurate, because I would love to learn from your experience of Pluto, because it helps me to do my work, you know? Speaking of work, if you would like to support my work here on this channel in the making of these videos and doing the research that goes into them, please consider becoming a member of this channel. Cosmic QTs get special perks like custom emojis and loyalty badges. You get to see content before it's actually published to the public. And you get to support your favorite Black queer autistic astrologer. If the monthly commitment is a bit much for you, I totally understand. Please, if you like this video, consider doing a tip via the thanks button. And if those financial sorts of ways of supporting don't feel like something that you can manage right now, please just do a like, throw me a comment, maybe share my videos with your friends. That too is the kind of support that I need. So yeah, thanks for supporting me, and thanks for making it all the way to the end of this video. And as always, thank you for making time for queer astrology. And shadow work too, huh? Yeah, that part. All right, y'all. Bye.